Great. Seeing none, there is no old business to discuss, so we'll carry forward right to the new business. We'll start with our first item, 41 Cove Road, preliminary plan, Valentine. This is for the purpose of reviewing a proposed two-lot subdivision. This is not a public hearing. Leanne, can we start with you for an overview?
Sure, yeah. So we received this preliminary plan towards the end of December. This is for 41 Cove Road. So this board has not seen a preliminary plan in front of them for a number of years. So basically an applicant may file for a preliminary plan before they file for a definitive subdivision plan. And basically what that does is it gives the departments and the board an opportunity to look at the design, the layout, any issues, waivers requested, and provide their input without actually going through the formal definitive approval process, and without you vote to either approve at modifications, or deny the preliminary plan, but any approval is not an approval of a definitive plan, and the applicant still has to return and go through the full definitive process. The only thing a preliminary plan will do is it will shorten the time frame the board has to act on a definitive plan. So it shortens it from 135 days to 90 days.
Great, thank you, that was helpful. So there are two memorandums that I'm going to read into the record. The first we received with our items for the agenda. It is from Michael Avila, the Assistant Health Agent, dated January 15th, 2025. Memorandum is regarding preliminary subdivision plan, 41 Cove Road. This memorandum outlines the Health Department's comments regarding the preliminary subdivision plan for the property located at 41 Cove Road, Sandwich. Number one, in accordance with the Sandwich Board of Health regulations, any new buildings constructed on the properties are required to connect to the Sandwich Water District service, provided that service is available. Number two, any dwellings existing or constructed on the properties must be serviced by an on-site waste system that complies with the Sandwich Board of Regulations of Health Regulations and 310 CMR 15, the State Environmental Code, Title 5. Please contact the Sandwich Health Department if you have any questions. And the second memorandum came in this afternoon, dated today, January 21st, 2025, from Paul Tilton, Director of Public Works, and Sam Jensen, Town Engineer. Subject 41 Cove Road, application for approval of preliminary plan / Valentine. The Engineering Department has reviewed the subject request and offers the following for the board's consideration. Number one, the subject lots would front on Cove Road, which is a private street. Cove Road was found to be generally 10 to 12 feet wide from the intersection with Artisan Way and across the subject frontage into Mashpee. Portions of the road surface are paved. Approximately 190 feet of the road across the subject lot frontage is gravel with some rutting and potholes noted. Neither formalized drainage nor a conforming turnaround were found to be present. It does not appear that Cove Road meets the Planning Board's minimum road construction standards as specified in Section 5S of the Subdivision Rules and Regulations. It is recommended that the segment of Cove Road utilized for access to the subject lots be improved to meet said standards. Number two, review for consistency with 3B2 preliminary plan contents. Namely, A, the site shall identify the name of the subdivision, and G, the plan shall identify the proposed system of storm drainage and drainage calculations shall be provided. Please contact the Engineering Department with any questions regarding this. Sam, did you want to add to any of that, or is that captured?
Those are the main elements that we found in our review.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we will start. We'll turn it over to the applicant.
All right, I am Craig Ferrari with Down Cape Engineering, here representing the applicant. So here we have a proposed two-lot subdivision of an existing 4.4 acre lot located right on the border of the town with Mashpee. So right now this property, obviously fronting on the pond, is developed with a house, a well and septic. It's my understanding that town water is not available in this area. The division line that we are proposing for these lots will keep all existing improvements, the house, the well, and the septic, located on Lot A. So those improvements will all comply with zoning if you choose to approve this proposed property line. that would divide this property. The current frontage is 355.62 feet, which falls just a hair shy of the 400 feet required to divide this into 2 lots. So that's the main reason that we've proposed the paper road that you see here, is that the town requirement is 200 foot of frontage per lot, so we're approximately 45 feet short of that. Therefore, we're proposing a paper road extension of Cove Road to provide that needed frontage. So basically, we're adding the paper road to provide the required street frontage here to split this into 2 lots and create a new lot that would be able to be developed by the applicant. So this is, a family-owned property. They also own the property across the street, and they're just looking to, make some new improvements, add a new house to this site. Obviously, it's quite a large property, so we feel that it supports that use. Given the engineering comments here, I would hope that we can have the town waive the requirements to build the paper road stub, and maybe we can make some improvements on the existing Cove Road. That way we could put a new driveway in to service the new house that's proposed. So happy to answer any questions you folks have.
Anyone have any questions for the
I don't understand what a paper road is.
So essentially, we're just requesting to waive the standards to actually construct the road. So typically, if we were going to build this road and divide this into 2 properties, we would have to build a large pavement cul-de-sac, essentially, within this roadway. So we're requesting to waive those standards and then just essentially, based on engineering comments, improve the existing access and then put just a simple driveway rather than a large swaths of pavement, which would be a little unsightly for this area.
So Cove Road is a public road that would be being improved?
It's a private road.
It's a
private road. And it's my understanding that it does go through to Sandwich, and it is a through road. I haven't actually driven the whole thing myself, but it's my understanding that it connects to Pimlico Pond Road. So I don't know if we've looked at fire department access via that. It's a little unique situation with the awkward town border in this area.
And if I may,
Of course.
regarding fire department access, that's one of the reasons that the board has their minimum road construction standards, which requires an 18-foot wide road width. In this case, my recommendation would be to look at building a turnaround, perhaps not a cul-de-sac, but at the least a hammerhead or branch type turnaround within the layout, the proposal layout that they're showing there, to the full width of 18 feet. The full road construction standard would be a 20-foot wide paved road. And in this case, with the scale of this development, I would have no objection to if the board were in favor of waiving the full road requirement.
There's copies of the full plans. Would anybody like to see these? They're larger scaled. Anyone?
I think what I don't understand, Sam, is there's already a road to a home. And is that the existing road doesn't meet standards?
Correct. And so the department's position on that has been that if the road doesn't meet the definition of a street, there technically is no frontage. It's a legal issue that Leanne maybe will speak better than I on. But if the road doesn't meet the 18-foot wide gravel, at least 18 feet wide where there's gravel or paved, and have a conforming turnaround and et cetera, then technically it doesn't meet the definition of a street. And if it isn't a street, then...
There's no frontage.
Right.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
So what you're kind of talking about was instead of that large circular paper road, it would just be a wider driveway, like an 18-foot width driveway per se, road.
Could be. Yeah.
With a cul-de-sac, a little ability, because I'm wondering how deep that would go.
So essentially, we would incorporate a turning T that would allow a fire truck or a larger vehicle to be able to make that turnaround. So essentially, the proposed driveway that's coming off of Cove Road that doesn't exist. We would improve Cove Road to the 18-foot width, probably extend the pavement from the end of the pavement where it is right now. So we'd be extending this pavement, we'd widen this to 18 feet, and then we'd provide a turnaround. So you could pull in and then back up and then come back out the road. So we'd essentially improve that section within the paper right-of-way so that you'd be able to turn around in the driveway, essentially.
Would widen the road by giving up some of the land along the lot? Is that what you're saying?
Well, no, so there's no land. So the right-of-way extends to here, but the dash lines here are the actual traveled way. So right now, it's a narrow lane with trees on either side. So we would just widen the gravel roadway within the existing private right-of-way.
Oh, so the private right-of-way is 40 feet,
Yep.
but what's being used is 10 to 12?
Yes, correct.
And how far down does that go? Does it widen out when you go deeper into Cove Road? Does it open up? Or is it kind of that way all the way through?
There's another intersection right here that accesses these lots. So it's a paved, more major road just south of here. Artisan Way and
Yeah.
Cove Road intersection is a little just south of this property.
Yeah,
And
okay.
Artisan is a town road. It is paved, and it has a significantly wider width. Cove Road in its entirety is a private way, as I understand it. And it's, we have quite a bit of history of public interest on it, just with the condition of the road and what people can do about it to improve it.
Oh, really?
So it's been
It's a gravel
point
road,
of
correct?
discussion. What's that?
Cove Road is a gravel road?
Most of it is gravel, but there are a couple of segments that are paved in proximity to this project. So from Artisan Way north, it's paved for a short distance, 100, 200 feet, something like that. Then it turns to gravel across the lot frontage for these subject lots, and then returns back to pavement into Mashpee. And it is traversable, the length from Artisan up through into Mashpee to Pimlico, from what I understand. The problem that I really see is the width. And if the road's widened, it really should have some drainage incorporated to that as well. The proposed layout would look to me like it would likely have the room to accommodate drainage, just to account for the additional stormwater flows.
And so if you were to widen it to the desired width, whatever that's determined to be, how are you proposing the turnaround to look? So that circle would...
Essentially just the driveway that's shown.
Oh, that proposed driveway.
Yep, so that proposed driveway, it would need to be a little wider than what's shown here. Right now, I believe that's just, I think it's labeled as a 12-foot gravel drive, so it sounds like we would widen just the entrance portion, so just the first 40 feet or so to 18 feet wide.
Yeah. And use the fire department truck template to size the turnaround, right? Yeah.
And the turnaround would abut the way, Cove Road?
Yeah, it would basically be incorporated into the way, so it would be, essentially an oversized driveway entrance in that general area that's shown there.
So if that's the case with the frontage issue, the paper road would still exist just for purposes of frontage?
It would exist, and it would be
in
a
the
fire
plan.
department turning T within that road layout that we're creating here.
Okay, so you would still get your frontage on
So we
that?
would get our frontage, and we'd provide fire truck turning access, just to better access these properties in the case of an emergency.
Okay.
So questions relative to, there's currently a driveway almost at the Mashpee line that serves the current house.
Correct.
And I'm trying to think through without a picture of what this turnaround is going to be for the fire and how it's going to benefit the existing house.
Well, it wouldn't. The existing house is going to remain the same access that it is now. But it's no better or worse than what's exist. Well, it would be better because we're improving a section of Cove Road leading to the house.
Why
But
not
that
address it at this time?
that existing driveway would remain. I mean, there is a decent, that section is paved and there is access to this existing property.
Say that section, the section there.
So there's a section of pavement to the south, but there's also a section of pavement to the north from Mashpee that accesses the existing driveway. So that section would essentially remain the same there. It's a little bit wider in that area than the gravel road leading to that driveway from the south. So I guess it depends on how you're accessing the existing property. But to your point, we would be improving the section of Cove Road, so we would probably widen the whole section there up to that driveway, so that would improve the access.
I believe what we're going to do this evening, either approve it with, what'd you call it, modifications, or disapprove. And listening to this dialogue, where I'm at is there's no way I'm going to approve this as it currently is, and I'm not looking to disapprove it either. So we need to come to an approval with modification. And there's a lot of good discussion going on, but there hasn't been any final conclusions. And where my head is at that the modification that I would approve this evening, and I'm just one member of the board, would be one where you agree to work with engineering and come up with something that is acceptable to them, that provides adequate safety for both lots. And that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about improving the road to a situation where it is deemed safe by both engineering and the fire department. And then come back to us at the time that you file your final. And engineering coming in and saying, yea, verily, we support this, I think you could be very successful. It's just me talking. There are other members here too.
No, I would agree with that. I mean,
but there's no other modification. I don't want to sit here tonight and engineer it. But I do want you to go away with a clear understanding that if you come back and engineering still is not in agreement, at least from my perspective, you'll have a difficult time convincing me. I don't think Sandwich is any different than any other town. We have a history, towns have a history, and we're trying to improve that as we go forward relative to unaccepted ways, allowing certain waivers that only come back to really penalize the abutters in the future as not being maintained, creating unsafe situations, creating difficulties for the town and so forth. And we want to strive not to do that, but also create balance here where we don't, because as you say, it's a two-lot subdivision, and as Sam has said, not requiring a full road with all the paving and sidewalks and curbing and all that. So, we're trying to create a solution here which does not create a situation in the future and corrects some deficiencies that we currently have in this. So that's the kind of modification I could agree with this evening and vote for as we go forward.
Absolutely. Your comment is much appreciated, and that's exactly the kind of feedback we're looking for in this preliminary stage.
So the paving that you're looking for Cove Road would be from Artisan Way north? Is that how you're looking at it?
Well, it depends on what the board and what engineering are looking for here. Our starting point was to obviously, leave things gravel. That would be the preference here, but, if the board and engineering would like us to pave the entire section, then that's something we'd be open to.
And the section at issue that's being discussed is from Artisan Way north up to where the property, is that right?
Just the dash line section.
That's the part
in
that
between the two
we've been
pavement
focused on,
sections.
yes.
Done. Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, just the immediate area in front of this Cove Road extension
Okay.
Portion here.
And it doesn't look, there's
So it's
one
roughly
house-
150 feet.
It doesn't look like there's any other houses in that area that are coming off Cove Road. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, it's just the one driveway to the east there, which is again, property that's also owned by this family here. So it's not very heavily developed in this section of Cove Road.
Well, although I take that back, yeah, on the
Yeah, there
on
are
the
some.
easterly side, there's a couple little small roads that do jetty out that look like they would be using that section of road. I don't have names of those roads. I don't know if they're new names, but okay. So it does look like it does get some use at least from other houses.
Yeah, there are quite a few other houses, obviously, to the north across the town line here.
Sam, is there a preference on pave or?
We would strongly recommend that the road surface be paved. It is a far more durable surface and much more reliable in all weather conditions.
Anyone else have any other questions or comments for the applicant?
No, just I think what I heard, or maybe what I understood, and you can tell me process-wise, is to get some sort of conceptual agreement so then they could go forward and work out the details. And the conceptual agreement would be a paved road and a turnaround that meets the fire department template you mentioned and a drainage plan. Is that about it?
I think that sounds about right. And I would be in agreement with, I think, some of the comments so far. Everything that's being proposed and talked about sounds good to me, but I would like to see an updated plan so I can see kind of what that little turnaround might look like, have maybe some drainage plans in consultation with engineering so that when it does come back before us, Sam can say confidently that the drainage issues have been addressed in a manner that they're comfortable with. It sounds like paving is probably the preferred, no less than an 18-foot width, maybe 20 would be better. Yeah, so it's the safety issue that was brought up, the paving, the width of the road, and just so we can see what it would look like on the plan.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I have one question that I don't know if we know the answer to. Would any fire be responded to by Sandwich only, or would Mashpee respond?
I don't know. I suspect it's going to have to do with the nature of the call and the call volume, and how the different departments are currently responding to other situations.
Yeah. Might they have other requirements different from our road and template?
Well, we typically just turn to if we're focused on the road, we typically turn to the road standards. So the full standard being the 20-foot width for a minor road or a lane, and then the 18-foot width on the reduced if the full standard is waived.
A state standard?
Yes, well, it falls back to some state standards, yes, but those were specifically adopted by the planning board for the town of Sandwich.
Thank you.
And I think from a width standpoint, just looking at the map online for Cove Road, like I mentioned, on the east side, there's a couple dead-end roads, and there's some houses. There's 36, 38, 34, I don't know the addresses. So I don't know how much throughway that section gets. So, I don't think it would be unreasonable to consider an 18-foot road unless, Sam, you felt strongly otherwise. But I think if they're going to be paving that large section, a 2-foot, reduction in width might help cost. And if it's not going to impact a lot of other residents coming in and out, and you can still access via safety, I don't think that would be unreasonable. I think I'd be comfortable entertaining that.
That's a question. The paved section that's in Mashpee, how wide is it?
It's probably 10 to 12 feet. I'm sure it varies greatly as you go up it, but it's pretty similar to what's there on the south. It's fairly narrow as terms of roads go.
And do we know if I suspect therefore the Mashpee piece is private also?
Yeah, it's my understanding that it's private there. I haven't looked into the legality of that because we're only working on this side of the town line.
Just asking if you know. And then the paved section that's towards, is that Otterson Way?
Yeah, to the south.
To the south, how wide is that?
Yep, so that is the 10 to 12 foot section noted in the engineering comments.
So the Mashpee piece paved is 10 to 12.
Yeah,
The
it's,
sandwich piece to the south that's paved is 10 to 12
yes, correct.
currently.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, so there's some sections of it currently paved, it's not all gravel?
Yeah, it's not all gravel. There's existing pavement that we would essentially connect into with this.
What's the condition of that pavement that's existing? Is it like okay to
From
reuse
what I
and
saw
tie
on
into?
the south side, it was in fair condition, fair to good condition, I would say.
Okay.
So.
Would it could it be worthwhile, like repairing in any way? As like, thinking about conditions, I should probably drive down there before our next meeting, just to get a look, because if it's kind of deteriorating from the lifespan of it, I'm just wondering if it might be worthwhile to.
I mean, obviously, we would like to just pave the section in front of our lot. It's going to be a great expense just to do that and the turning T here.
Yeah.
And then, the southern sections could be improved at a later date.
Okay, yeah, I'll probably take a drive down there, because it sounds
Yeah,
like.
it looks like it's paved on both sides of,
Oh, okay.
see?
Oh, pavement. Oh, yeah.
So it's just the part
Oh.
in front of this property that.
Yep.
Okay. No, I see that. Thank you for pointing
There
that
may
out.
be a pothole or two right at the, where it intersects with the gravel portion. So
It might
at
be
the least,
worthwhile.
those should be patched.
Yeah, so maybe just fixing any spots that are, have potholes, or might look like they might deteriorate at sooner than later, maybe within like the next 5 years or so, 5-10 years. Yeah. Okay. So if there's any other comments, questions, no?
This is just a question. Who's responsible for the upkeep of the entirety of the private road?
The abutters, on a private way, the abutters are responsible for upkeep out to there. They have halfway.
The direct abutters on that road?
Direct abutters, on a
So-
private way would be direct abutters, and they
So on the,
responsible for road maintenance.
so roads that offshoot Cove Road that have properties on it, would they be responsible as well?
I'm not sure you mean by offshoot.
Well, it's,
So it depends on who owns the road. So if an abutter to the road owns to the halfway point, then there's some, requirement to maintain. But if they just have a right to use a way
okay.
that was owned
If
by
they have a right
somebody
to use,
else, I don't know.
They
if
don't
it-
have any responsibility.
I don't think the answer is quite that clear on whose
Okay.
responsibility it would be.
Okay.
So I guess it depends on the ownership interest
Okay.
of it.
I was just curious.
But
So with the shortage on the frontage, how is that going to be handled? That's just going to be waived, or?
So what they have provided would provide an adequate amount of frontage per our zoning. So if they were to go through the approval not required process, which would be preferable, where they wouldn't need to put in any type of alterations or turning Ts, they were missing just, I think what you said was
45 feet.
45 feet to make that zoning compliant for building purposes. So they're going through this process in order to make 2 zoning compliant lots. So the frontage issue in this case wouldn't apply.
okay, so
I do have a draft memo to the town clerk for the board if you want to walk through it with your comments.
okay, and then we can continue it until, how would that work if you want to see another plan before we make any decision?
So that would be the definitive plan, would be
Oh,
the
okay.
reference.
They'd come back with the definitive. So right now, all you're doing is deciding if you're going to approve a modification, or disapprove the preliminary plan. We file those comments with the town clerk. Nothing gets registered at the Registry of Deeds. It's not an approval of the plan. It doesn't become in effect. They are then tasked to come back within a certain period of months with the definitive approval, and the board goes through that full process. But you have 90 days to make a decision once filed.
Okay, so then we're giving you our feedback, you're gonna get the definitive plan updated, and then, and I might just add, just make sure you hit all the requirements for the plan that are in all of our bylaws. I know in past plans, that's been a sticking point, so just kind of noting that would be worthwhile, just to kind of cross some Ts and dot some Is.
Yeah, sure thing.
Okay, if you bear with me, I can pull up the...
Everybody's all set?
So then approving the preliminary plan does not negate
It's not approval
our
of the
response to
definitive.
the definitive plan?
Correct.
Okay.
And it doesn't tie the board to the comments you've made tonight. you can change your mind at any point. Obviously, this is helpful so that the applicant knows what to provide going forward, but you're not bound by this decision.
Jeff, were you going to say something?
I was simply going to say that until we see the memo, we aren't approving anything, is what I was going to say. That's all.
And just because, Leanne, you said, like, we're not bound to it, of course, we can revisit with the definitive plan, but is the whole purpose, is the spirit of the whole purpose to provide feedback that we would stand by so that people can efficiently work
Of
through the
course.
process? Is that, okay?
Yes, yep. Yep. It usually just helps to speed up the definitive process.
Oh, you know, I should have probably asked, do you have any more?
Nope,
comments or anything?
that's
You're
fine
good?
by me.
Okay.
Okay, so then, so basically as it reads, it's a memo to the town clerk, like I stated. It's much abbreviated from your usual types of decisions. Basically states at the regularly scheduled meeting of the planning board held this evening, the board voted to approve or deny the above preliminary plan as follows. Whichever member moves that the board accept or deny the preliminary subdivision plan of land in Sandwich prepared for Paul Valentine, dated December 9th, 2025. There is one waiver included in this plan that will have to be addressed during the definitive plan. You don't typically waive at this point. And then the comments. So I was just taking notes. Typically the comments help provide guidance. So what I've taken down is work in conjunction with the engineering department to provide adequate, safe access to the proposed and existing lot by addressing paving, drainage, and a fire department turnaround.
Was it, you had paving in there?
Yeah, so those were the three main issues, but then I liked what Jeff said about providing adequate, safe access to the proposed and existing lot. And then we can add a second comment that just says, you know, the board reserves their right to address any additional issues through the definitive process as they may arise.
With the road, does everybody feel comfortable with 18 feet in width?
I do if you do, really.
Given the scale of this proposal, I don't object to that.
Okay, and then, and any addressing.
So just respect to that, until I see a plan, that's, you know, from me, that's guidance.
Right, well, that's what we're doing.
It may come back that it has to be 20. You know, until you work with engineering, you lay it out and you see what the fire department requires for a turnaround and so forth, there may be a section that has to be 20 and a section that has to be 18. So we'll be a little careful that, you know, maybe you come back with 16 because some of it's only 12 to 14 and 18 all of a sudden jogging 12 to 14 is not going to help with drainage. So I don't know.
And just to reiterate, all of our comments are subject to change. This is just guidance, and then the definitive plan will have an opportunity to revisit, just for clarity.
I know that. I'm only going back on the comment that Jean made relative to I don't want them going away thinking one thing and then they come back and they say, well, wait a minute, because it's not fair to you that you go away saying, oh, but you agreed to 18.
Understood.
The goal is 18, but it's really, you know, working with Sam and truly understanding so that both lots, you know, in the end, we end up with a solution that provides safety. I don't know what it's going to be.
Potholes, maybe address any potholes. Roadway, generally, existing roadway.
Just do a subsection, so it looks a bit. Paving, including potholes, drainage, and fire department approved turnaround.
Identify the name of the subdivision. That was on the memorandum from Sam's office. And just general compliance with the bylaws to make sure that the definitive plan has all the items required on it.
Can you tell me what utilities are currently provided?
I believe it's just electric.
it's electric, and where does the line run?
So there's overhead electric shown in the private way. So right now there's a couple of poles out here, and then one that goes onto this property that feeds the house. So we likely tie into that utility pole across the road there.
Yeah, I was more interested in where the line ran. Currently, it's running on the travel way.
It's very, very close.
Sometimes they run travel ways in one place,
Yeah, they're-
lines run elsewhere. That's what I was curious. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
And would it be necessary for us to add in there just to address the Board of Health's comments about, it sounds like water is not available, municipal water is out that way, so just compliance with well and Title V requirements, is that necessary for us to add into this or not? Because it's more plan related.
Yeah, not necessarily. So part of the preliminary process is the Board of Health also has to file a decision with the town clerk within 45 days, and we do this jointly, so I'm working with the health department to do that. So all of their comments related to this subdivision will also be on file with the town clerk as part of a package.
Okay, great, thanks. I think was that it?
Yeah, if you'd like me to read over it, anything that's abbreviated, I'll write in full in the office tomorrow. But basically, the comments are to work in conjunction with the engineering department to provide adequate, safe access to the proposed and existing lot by addressing paving, including potholes, drainage, fire department approved turnaround, identify subdivision name, compliance with the subdivision rules and regulations, plan content guidelines, and the planning board reserves their right to address any issues during the definitive process as they may arise. So at this point, if there's nothing else to add, it's a motion to either approve or deny.
And it would be approving or denying the preliminary plan with comments. Okay, so I'll take a motion to approve the preliminary plan with comments is
I make a
proposed.
motion to approve the preliminary plan with comments.
Second.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed, abstain? Okay.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Good luck. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, my brain just started thinking. Okay. Next on the agenda is 0 West Side Spring Hill Road, Scenic Road Permit, Town of Sandwich. This is for the purpose of removing one red oak tree. I have the public hearing notice because this is a public hearing. Let's see, here we go. In accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 15C, the Scenic Road Act, the Sandwich Planning Board and the Sandwich Tree Warden will hold a joint public hearing on one red oak tree, which is located within the town road layout at 0 West Side Spring Hill, map number 60, parcel number 003-001, East Sandwich, Massachusetts. The tree to be removed will be marked for public review. The Town of Sandwich is the applicant and property owner. The public hearing will be held on January 21st, 2025 at the Sand Hill School Community Center, 16 Dewey Ave, Sandwich, Mass. at 6 p.m. The public record information can be viewed at the Planning and Development Office. Jennifer Reisig, Chair, Sandwich Planning Board. Publication Sandwich Enterprise on dates January 3rd and January 10th, 2025. I will take a motion to open the public hearing.
I make a motion to open the public hearing on removing the one red oak tree.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, great. I will read, we have one memo. I'm going to read it into the record. It's from David DeCanto, Director of Natural Resources. Subject, it's dated January 13th, 2025. Subject, 0 West Side Spring Hill Road, Scenic Road Permit, Town of Sandwich. This content states, the memo states, the Conservation Commission has reviewed the application for the above listed special permit to remove red oak tree and does not have any issues or comments. Please let me know if you have any further questions or require additional information. Leanne, do you have any comments that you'd like to add?
Yes, so our tree warden, James Sacco, could not be here tonight. Unfortunately, he had an emergency and needed to go home. So he did provide me with his notes for the application, which I can read to the board, and then you can determine whether or not you have any additional questions that maybe myself or Sam can't answer about the property. At that point, we could either continue the application until February 4th, when the tree warden would be able to join us, or if you feel you have enough information, we can move forward with the decision tonight. So if it's okay with you, I can read his comments aloud.
Of course, thank you.
Okay, so he states the tree in discussion is a 28-inch diameter black oak, 70 to 80 feet high in height, located near the intersection of Quaker Road and Spring Hill Road. The tree is in decline, showing dieback in the upper canopy, which indicates that the root system is shutting down, likely due to repeated years of drought. Due to the lean of the tree towards the road and the majority of the canopy being over the road, if a branch or whole tree failure were to occur, the tree or a branch is likely to block Quaker Road, which is a dead-end road, for an extended period of time. This could potentially be dangerous to the residents on Quaker Road during an emergency situation. I recommend removing this tree based on its health and potential risk to the public.
Great, thank you. I'll open the matter up to the board. Does anyone want to make any comments or?
Well, I've looked at the material and certainly the picture of the tree, and it certainly looks like it does pose a danger.
I would agree.
Is this town-owned land where the tree is?
Correct, yeah,
So it could also be a liability as well.
potentially.
Should it fall on a car or, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
What is, did James give you any indication of when it would come down?
He said sooner rather than later, because I was asking about the continuation to the next meeting, and he said his biggest concern would be that we would have a storm in between, it would fall, and it would just block the residents from being able to leave their street.
So fundings, is the funding available? Take it down?
Correct. Yes.
Funding is available.
Yes.
I tend to favor quick action just for that reason. Once you've identified the hazard, we should eliminate it as quickly as we can.
All right, I don't see any public here, but just for purposes of the record, I'm just noting that there is no public here to make a comment. So I guess at this point, we can take a motion to close the public hearing, and then we can deliberate and just bring our decision forward.
I make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
All right, no opposition. All right, so we can deliberate, I think. I'm in favor.
Me too.
I am too.
All right.
Through the chair, I do have a draft decision ready to go.
Perfect.
If you'd like me to run through it.
Thank you.
Okay, so procedural history. On December 27th, 2024, an application for a scenic road permit was filed for the purpose of removing one red oak tree in the town layout on property located at 0 West Side Spring Hill. The application was accompanied by a photo of the subject tree. After proper notice was given, the public hearing was opened on January 21st, 2025, and closed on January 21st, 2025. The board reviewed the application and all other materials submitted prior to the close of the public hearing. The board received and gave due consideration to testimony given at the public hearing. The following board members attended the public hearing and are eligible to vote on this matter: Jennifer, Ann, Jeffrey, Jean, and Eileen. Findings. The board makes the following findings. 1, request to remove one red oak tree at 0 West Side Spring Hill due to the tree being in decline. 2, the surrounding area is heavily shaded by trees. Would you like to add a finding or remove any?
So there's two I'd like to add relative to comments that were made that we asked. One is that the funds exist. That's not going to be an issue. And the other finding was that the tree warden expressed concern about doing it quickly. I'm not sure what word you want to put in there, but
Sure.
The emergent nature of its removal.
Which is why we didn't
Wait for him.
wait for February 4th,
Okay.
since there's a need to move, or a request he
Expedited
desire.
removal.
Think of one other finding. The other finding was a discussion that if a tree does come down, it will block residents at the other end.
Okay, great. Anybody else? Okay, then,
I just have a question. How does it work? Are we, or does anyone set a must be done by date? So we walk away with the understanding that we're abating the hazard, but if it keeps falling down on the to-do list, who?
Typically, it's
responsible
the tree warden that makes that call, and per his timeline. The only thing that the board typically conditions in these permits is that the work is done within 3 years. Yeah, so for an emergency situation, I mean, that's, but typically we fall to the guidance of the tree warden, and he acts swiftly in the case of an emergency.
okay. I, Jennifer Rising, move to adopt these findings as the findings of the planning board.
I second that motion.
All right, do I need a roll call, or can I,
Nope, you can just voice vote.
all in favor?
Aye.
All right, everyone is in favor?
And the conditions, at the public hearing, the planning board considered potential conditions of approval for this permit. The applicant shall be bound by these conditions. 1, this permit shall lapse if tree removal has not been completed within 3 years from the date of approval. If you'd like to add any conditions or change an existing condition.
I, Jennifer Rising, move to impose the above conditions of approval upon any approval of the permit.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone oppose or abstain?
And then it's the final.
All right, I, Jennifer Rising, move that the board approve the scenic road application for the above described tree removal.
Seconded, motion seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
So, next is board discussion. There are a few topics, beginning with proposed zoning amendments. The first on that list are the ADUs. All right, take it away, Leanne.
Sure. So as I had previously mentioned, the housing bond bill that went through state government was passed in August. February 2nd, we see the introduction of ADUs being made a protected class under zoning statutes, which means that our current regulations will become out of compliance with state regulations. As such, I have drafted a new ADU bylaw and a new lot merger doctrine bylaw for the board's review and hopefully approval. And as we spoke previously, if you are in non-compliance with state bylaws, it potentially wounds you when you go for grants, because typically you have to tick a box that you're in compliance with everything from state law. So it could, damage us that way. But then also, and probably more severely, the state can also sue a local municipality for being in non-compliance. Now, something like that doesn't typically happen on the offset of new regulations, but as the years pass, if this were not to become law and sandwich, then we do open ourselves up to a lawsuit. So for the ADU regulations, which we will start with, these have been drafted by myself and then revised by Town Council. They have not gone out for departmental review yet. For ADUs, particularly interested in what engineering has to say and the fire department in terms of creating new addresses, driveway permits, things like that. So what you're reading right now is just in strict compliance with the state requirements, and then the hope is to bring this back before you at your next meeting in February 4th, where if there's any additional town departmental inputs for your review, that we could go through those at that point, and then host a public hearing on the matter at your last meeting in February, which I believe is the 18th. So if you'd like me to start, I'm happy to go through it. It's probably best to go through it line by line and see if you have any comments and the justification as to why something changed. Okay. Can everyone see that okay on the screen? It's a bit. Okay, so the first change would be under the use table, accessory uses. We had a footnote 26 added previously that stated that a detached ADU on a non-conforming lot requires a minimum lot size and a special permit from the ADU, from the planning board. We're no longer able to enforce that under new state guidelines. We are no longer able to enforce a lot size. Every lot in a residential district is now eligible for an accessory dwelling unit. The dimensional components of that district would limit whether it would be detached, attached, or interior, but some version of that is allowed within every zoning district now. Everything in black is what's currently existing. Strike through is what we need to get rid of, and red bolded is what is introduced. So if we move down to requirements, an ADU constructed within a single-family dwelling, attached to a single-family dwelling, or as a detached structure shall be permitted as a by right use in all residential districts as shown in section 2210. So then we needed to get rid of pretty much all the rest of that section. We had limitations on how many were allowed during the year. We're no longer able to enforce that. Then we went into special permit criteria. We went into minimum lot size criteria. We're no longer able to enforce that. So then just clarifying, the building commissioner shall administer and enforce the provisions of this section. We're no longer able to use the special permit for your first ADU. ADUs are not eligible for zoning variances, that meaning dimensional variances. We do not use use variances in the town of Sandwich. We can keep that it needs to be compliant with state building code, Title V, and all other applicable regulations. Prior to the issuance of a building permit, we got rid of special permit for ADU site plans. So floor plans, Town Council did have a question on floor plans. We are not allowed to regulate the interior of an ADU, so she thought that that might be a red flag for the Attorney General's office. If it passed town meeting, that it may be sent back to us for that reason, so I eliminated it. And then I eliminated the next part, which said showing the proposed interior and exterior changes, just because that may remand it back to us. I thought maybe we were safer to delete floor plans and interior. So they would just be providing site plans and elevations showing the exterior changes to either the existing building or the new building being proposed.
You are, apologize, where are you right now? Oh, you're up there.
Oh,
4133.
What are you looking at? when you're
We're
talking
on-
about
I'm on section E, the new E, under, so 41,
32.
right here.
the new E under 4132?
Yes. So it states prior to the issuance of a building permit for an ADU, site plans, we eliminated floor plans, and elevation shall be submitted showing the proposed, and then got rid of interior and exterior changes to existing buildings or new building and improvements on a lot associated with a proposed ADU.
So I have a question and a comment on this section. Comment, I'd like to see us add, as far as plans that are called out, I'd like to see us add a landscaping plan as a requirement, if we can, under this section. And you asked the reasons why. One of the complaints I've heard about ADUs, and it's not just in Sandwich, it's other towns too, is the placement of them and the screening, greenery and so forth. People would like to see it better controlled or defined or at least acknowledged. And I think if we put a landscaping plan in here, we can help drive that understanding and information. So I'd like to see that added as a plan. The question I have, it goes back to the document you gave us back when you introduced this to us. And I printed one page here that was, I was trying to understand. So it says ADU legislation definition, section 7, and this was a presentation that you gave us last fall. So I don't know how this matured and went into the document or didn't, but it has to do with section, the double I, which it talks about gross floor area.
Yeah.
So is there something in the state reg on how large an ADU can be? So my concern is, I get an existing home, 2,000 square feet, and they build a 4,000 square foot ADU. That's not an ADU. You know, the idea behind an accessory dwelling unit was just that, it's accessory, and the idea was to create something, you know, that allowed for, you know, the idea behind ADU is housing is so expensive, it's so hard to get a hold of. How do we create more housing in a meaningful way, but not disruptive to the community? Putting a 4,000 foot ADU on a 2,000, you know, lot that has a 2,000 square foot house doesn't make sense to me. Did the state limit that? Because the way I read this, it says gross floor area, half the gross floor area of the principal dwelling, or 900 square feet, whichever is smaller. That's what's in bold on here. Did that get carried into the law?
Yes.
It did.
So that is what our new definition would be when it comes to
Okay.
when it comes to the accessory dwelling unit.
Okay, so there is control on the size of an ADU they can put
Correct.
in the law that would carry forward that we'd have to comply with. Great.
Yes.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, no problem. If we want to move on to 4133, use and dimensional requirements. So only one ADU is permitted per lot. We got rid of that. That one's up for discussion because it depends on how you want to move forward on a different section. So we can revisit that first one when we get further down. And then we just put dimensional requirements per section 2600 shall govern the creation of an ADU. 2600 is our, not our use table, it is our dimensional requirements table. So an ADU still has to meet setback, it still has to meet lot coverage. Hence, if you have a small lot, you may not be able to have a detached ADU. It may have to be internal in the home. So those requirements still carry through. The only one that doesn't is lot size. The ADU should be a complete separate housing unit containing both a kitchen and a bath. Keeping just seems to be a typo because that didn't make sense, so I got rid of it. For the next one, an ADU shall be clearly subordinate in use, size, and design to the principal single-family dwelling. The rest of it I had kept in, but council said that we should remove it. That is a gray area, and it does not state in the new regulations that we would be able to enforce the style of the ADU to the extent that we would be permitting it not to go forward. So I kept the first sentence, just try and get the intent there, and then deleted the rest of the rest of the sentence, basically.
Do you think that landscaping might fall into that same category, that it could be used as a way to deny, that they might look at it that way?
I will ask council that question if we can, ask for a landscaping plan. One of the things that she said we could ask for was site plan review, which in Sandwich we do internally with the department heads for the regulatory departments and engineering and fire and police and so forth. So that's something that can come up internally under our review before they go for a building permit, that we could, request as much shrubbery as possible, but the AG won't approve anything that would unreasonably restrict someone from creating an ADU on their property. So we just need to be careful how we phrase it. Maybe we could say preferably provides a landscape plan, but I don't know how we'd 100% enforce it, but I can always ask.
Why is a landscape plan an issue? I'm lost here.
Just when I had mentioned that we weren't able to regulate the appearance of the ADU.
Right.
Jennifer brought up that would we then be able to enforce a landscaping plan? So I said it's a question that I've written down that I'll ask council, but I was hoping that through a site plan review process with the departments before they filed for a building permit, that we'd be able to discuss landscaping.
We're just asking for a plan. It's not imposing that the landscaping plan has to meet certain things. We're just asking for a landscaping plan.
To see what it will look like.
Which could add to some subjectivity, and the unreasonableness of, I'm just saying, it's worth noting it and the council sounds like they're on it anyways, but just I think it kind of fell a little bit in the same vein of what you were describing with appearance of the ADU, so.
Sure. I can always ask the question. Yep. Then at least one off-street parking space in addition to that required for the principal single-family dwelling. And then unless the ADU is located within 0.5 miles from a transit station, that's part of the new state regulations. It's really for MBTA communities, but, just in case we ever get one, it's good to just have it in there. We can still regulate that the ADU may not be sold or transferred separate and apart from the principal dwelling, which it is an accessory use from. The principal dwelling of the ADU and the lot on which they are located shall remain in common or single ownership and not be severed in ownership. We're still able to enforce that one. But then, as you'll see with the next one, we are not able to. We're not able to enforce that the residence be that of the primary owner. We're not allowed to enforce ownership as related to who stays on the property. So essentially, both the main dwelling and the accessory dwelling unit could both be rented. No one needs to reside on the property. That was the biggest change made by the state, and the one that people tend to have the hardest problem with. Just trying to understand how that really works in a community, especially in a seasonal community where it could really change the character of a lot of our neighborhoods. The primary dwelling and ADU shall not be used for boarding and lodging or other commercial uses, including but not limited to short-term rentals or seasonal rentals. So the purpose of the creation of ADUs is for year-round rentals.
Can I ask a question on that? On the primary dwelling, basically it's saying that the owner doesn't have to live there. Mm-hmm. Can we put something in about if the owner does not live there, that it be the same kind of thing that you have in for the ADU, that it has to be a 12-month rental, not a short-term thing?
Yeah, we can do that.
Put something like that in. I mean, that would restrict it a little bit. Maybe they'd accept that.
Yeah, so we could say no occupancy of the primary dwelling or the ADU is permitted other than by lease of a minimum. I'll have to just rephrase that actually a little bit, because otherwise it sounds like they can't occupy it for themselves either. But
at least that gives us something.
Is everyone else okay with that?
There was one additional comment I had on that,
Sure.
Which was we could specifically call out that seasonal use is not permitted.
Yep.
We're really looking, the purpose behind ADU was to create
Year-round,
affordable housing, particularly for service industry and so forth. So, I'd like to see words in that specifically. I know it says rentals in 1 year minimum and everything, but I think it would be good to call out, since seasonal use is so popular on the Cape, that that's not allowed.
Is that different than short-term rentals or seasonal rentals?
So a seasonal use is not a rental, it's a use.
But it says seasonal rental.
Yeah, I'm not talking rentals, I'm talking the owner only uses it seasonally. So you build an ADU,
Okay, I see what you're
and
saying.
then you let your family use it seasonally, the kids come down one week, and other kids come down another week. We're really not getting what we wanted for an ADU. It's really just creating an opportunity for a vacation home.
Is that hard to regulate? Because if I own a house and I build an ADU and my kids want to come down and spend a couple weeks in the summer, that's hard to regulate, I think. It's different when you're renting it because there's more regulations you can put in place, but I think it's hard to regulate family use of a property that's owned by the family.
Yeah, because we have a lot of families that go to Florida.
It's an ADU. It falls under, it's just...
Well, I think the ADU is clear. It's the primary dwelling you're talking about, right?
No, I'm talking about the ADU. I'm
Well, I
talking about
think-
someone has a primary
but I think
dwelling.
that- I think-
They build an ADU, and all they do with it is have their family rotate through it on seasonal basis.
But I think it says that right in there, including but not limited to short-term rentals or
I'm
seasonal
not talking
rentals.
rentals, I'm talking seasonal use. Not seasonal rental, seasonal use. That's why I used the word use.
Okay,
I'd like to
so
see
you're talking
that
about
word in there.
families.
Is it hard to regulate? Sure, but we're gonna avoid it because it's hard to regulate?
I don't think it's.
I don't know that personally, I don't know that I support that.
Yeah,
I
I
think
don't
that's
think I
what
do
families might like to use their ADU for, and I support that.
It's not
If
the
I could-
purpose of an ADU. When there wasn't the reason that we opened it up and allowed ADUs on otherwise lots that would not be able to have a second home on it.
We're not talking about what we permitted, we're talking about what the state is permitting and what we're bound to, and I think
understand
Leanne
what you're
wanted to add something.
I just wanted to provide context a little bit around that issue. So if you remember back when we first did our ADU bylaw several years ago, at the same town meeting, we struck guest house. And the purpose we did that is we thought it was becoming redundant because we had the by right apartment for in-laws, and then we had the ADU. How we've always interpreted it is that, if you meet the criteria for an ADU, you can construct one and it could potentially be used as a guest house. But the minute you rent it, you have signed an affidavit that we register with the Barnstable County Registry of Deeds that you will, if you are renting the property, you rent it for 12 months, that you are not allowed to use it as a seasonal rental or as a short-term rental. But we've always maintained that if someone was because we eliminated guest house, that it could be used as a guest house if your intention was not to rent it. But if that's going to change, then we should just clarify that so we know going forward for permitting.
You use the word "we." I would say that the town made the decision to do that, but it wasn't unanimous.
From the minutes, I believe it was, because it was a discussion that I
I'm
had.
talking about the town meeting. I'm not talking about our meeting.
When we look at how to interpret bylaws, we always go back to the planning board meetings to see what the spirit and intent of that bylaw was.
No, I said when we voted on it at the town meeting,
Yeah.
it wasn't unanimous.
For ADUs?
Yes. It was not a unanimous vote at the town meeting. There were people who voted against it.
Yeah.
All right. So we have to be careful about saying that what we agreed to back then, everyone agreed to it.
Well, I'm talking about the planning board agreed to it. I wasn't talking about the full.
Okay.
I was just talking about the intent of how we read the bylaw.
I understand the planning board, yes.
Yes,
Okay.
that's
I thought you
all I'm
meant the
referring to.
town.
Yeah, not the town as a whole. Yeah.
I see. I would like to see it not allowed for seasonal use.
I disagree.
I disagree as well. I think
Disagree as
people
well.
should be able to use their property as they see fit within the law, so.
If they're not renting it, if their kids want to come down, or they have I am in agreement with.
Right. And isn't some of it, the whole origination of it was, for an elderly parent or, and maybe you're not going to charge them and rent it to them. So, why shouldn't they be able to live there and use it without restriction?
What if you
The
use your?
intent of the ADU, when you go back, was the issue with shortage in housing that was affordable. It fell under the umbrella of affordable. I remember the discussions when we talked about the 10% that we put in place when we had the cottages that were converted. We talked about other state programs for affordability, and we talked about ADUs. It was all under the umbrella of creating affordable housing, year-round affordable housing. That's how the discussion went. That's how ADUs became into the discussion. It wasn't to create the ability for someone to put another home on their property where they could have family rotate through and use it seasonally. That was not the intent of the ADU discussion that I was in.
So
The
going.
discussion was affordability year-round, and the idea was, I got elderly parents, their kids can't stay on the Cape, they'd have to move off. It'd be good if they could build a smaller unit, the parents move into it, the kids are here year-round, they're able to work on the Cape and take care of the parents. That was the idea behind the ADU. Now, I'm not in favor of seasonal use, and that was how I supported ADUs. You don't have to agree with it, and you know, and that's what the discussion's all about. You're not going to change my opinion on this relative to an ADU was not for seasonal use. And why do we put it this way? ADUs should not be for seasonal use. The intent of ADUs fell under discussion for affordable housing. That's why we were creating it. And there are many things you can't do with your home that is regulated. So to say that we shouldn't regulate people on how they use their home, we always regulate things for safety, sanitation, security, whatever. So,
But that's for public welfare. I think there is a line where it is a bit of an overreach.
okay,
so-
it's your opinion.
Yeah, so I think if 4 out of 5 are feeling this way, and we do have to bring this to town meeting, I'm of the opinion that the majority of that would carry it forward, that it not be added. I think that would make sense. If everybody, I think it either should be unanimous or the majority should control what we bring to town meeting, because we're presenting it as a board. So for that reason,
Well, understand that we go from here to a public hearing, and then from a public hearing, something goes forward to the town based upon the feedback that we get.
Right, but
You know,
when it
we've
goes-
had public hearings where we didn't even go forward with amendments.
well, maybe, perhaps, you could bring your opinion to public hearing, and if the public hearing is overwhelming in support of that, then the board can bring it forward to town meeting. But again, and I remember having this discussion over prior bylaws, we don't have to bring every idea forward. If the board is bringing it forward, we have to be either majority. In my opinion, it should be a majority decision or a collective, not a minority, because we're all in support of it, in bringing it to the town. I think at the public hearing, if you feel strongly about your opinion, I think that might be the proper time to voice it, and then we can get feedback. And if, again, the overwhelming opinion is in agreement with you, then the majority can reconsider their position. And that's how I feel on that matter.
Okay, you have your feeling.
Right.
So then as we move on to H, let me see. So we can no longer regulate lot size, so we struck that. An ADU shall have an occupancy of not more than 2 persons per bedroom. We're not allowed to regulate that either anymore. So then monitoring.
Did that, I apologize, because in that same document that I was reading that you gave us, well, maybe it was something I read online, I can't remember, but, you know, I went and looked up the law and what finally went through and so forth. I thought I saw something that said 2 adults per bedroom, kids under 12 didn't count against that, and then there was a maximum you could have. None of that went through? Is that what you're saying?
I don't believe so. That was something I had kept in that council flagged and said no longer consistent, so I struck it. I can ask for clarification on that if you'd like.
I do, because I was reading, and I was looking at some ADUs in other towns also, that are bringing theirs into compliance. And I thought some other towns were doing that, but I wasn't sure. And then, like I said, I thought I read somewhere, and maybe it was in that presentation again, but didn't make it into the law. This thing about 2 per kids under 12 didn't count towards that, and then there was one place, maybe it was one town wrote that you could only have 2 more. You could have 2 per bedroom plus 2 was, I think, the way they worded theirs and so forth. So
Okay.
I think limiting it is of value.
Okay.
Now, it may have been in short-term rentals, actually, that I was reading that. I'm getting the two confused.
Are there
But
regulations?
I do ask that you do take
Yeah.
a look at it.
I'll take another look at that and ask council if we can regulate something
Thanks.
there.
Are there regulations with like primary residences that they're limited to like one family and then the family's further defined? Is that?
No, they've thrown all of that out because we're not allowed to anymore regulate what a family is, because family means different to every person. So we don't regulate by that anymore. We regulate by bedrooms and septic is typically the definitions we use.
Okay, so then it's assumed that generally that a bedroom would total no more than 2 persons per bedroom. Is that kind of the idea? But it's not explicit in there. It's just
It's not explicit, and I don't believe we regulate by persons or, we don't have occupancy on homes like we do on commercial businesses. We regulate by bedroom size. And how many people you can fit in a bedroom is one thing. As Jeff was mentioning, it may have been the short-term rentals. When we look at a special use being allowed, you can regulate more in terms of that. But when you look at dwelling, long-term dwelling, we don't regulate by persons anymore.
okay. So the septic size in and of itself will help regulate the number of bedrooms that are available on the premises.
Reasonably regulate how many people
Which
could
would
fit in a
reasonably
bedroom.
regulate how many people would fit in a bedroom.
Yeah, and that's probably, these are the biggest drawbacks would be, lot coverage and septic. Most people have a septic capacity for just their existing home, so they would potentially have to give up a bedroom or, put in a special septic system to denitrify, but those are usually at a great cost.
Well, and if we're not allowed to request an interior plan, we wouldn't necessarily know what they were doing to modify bedrooms, closets, or anything.
The Board of Health would.
Board of Health would.
Yes, so we are not allowed for purposes of ADU permitting, but
Okay,
everything
but they
still
can-
goes towards the
okay.
Board of Health, so they can restrict
Okay.
per their Title V state regulations. Yeah. So then 4134 monitoring, we had to delete this because we're no longer able to ask for that affidavit that the owner shall be in residence in one of the units and that it won't be transferred in ownership. So then this is optional, the next section, 4134, permitting a second ADU. We just stated, in an effort to meet local housing needs, the owner of real property may apply for a special permit for a second ADU on their property. The planning board shall be the special permit granting authority. Sections 1330, which is the special permit criteria, and 4130 shall apply, which 4130 is your criteria for your accessory dwelling unit. This is completely optional. The board can discuss it. They can bring it to public hearing if they like. You do not have to vote for this to go forward to town meeting. If it did go forward to town meeting, I would have it in a separate article because this part is optional. So you would be permitting someone that they could go through the planning board to create a second ADU on their property, and then you could potentially have 3 rental units on one property. Staff is not really a fan of this at this point, just because it'd be interesting to see how the first round of ADU change.
We can always add this later too, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
You guys would probably just leave it without and then revisit. Thoughts?
I tried to research this today, and I saw nowhere did it say that there would be a limit on how many ADUs somebody could put in. So if they can comply with lot size and setbacks and septic systems, then where's the limit? And
So we can regulate 1 per lot.
you can.
We can, yes. We're allowed to say there's one accessory dwelling unit per lot, and then the board can bring forward to town meeting that you're allowed a second by special permit if you wish. But that part the state left optional. They didn't impose that on the towns. So we can regulate just 1 if that's the direction the board would like to go in.
Just one ADU.
Just 1 ADU per lot.
So I don't agree. Let me add clarification. The next step in this is it goes to public hearing. I think it's a value to leave this in there. And at the public hearing, let's hear from the public.
Yeah.
Do they want 1? Are they concerned about 2? And if they're not concerned about 2 and they like the idea of the option, then I would, say that we may reach a conclusion at time to recommend to the Board of Selectmen that to the warrant article be 2. But to take it out at this time, we don't get feedback from the public. So my recommendation, since we have the option to do this, I'd recommend we leave it in there and take it to the public hearing, and let's hear from the public.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to go, yeah.
And we can modify it any way that we want, right? So we can require minimum lot size and do whatever we need to do for any second ADUs.
Yep.
So if we didn't have this in here, would that mean there would be no option for anyone to ever have more than 1?
Correct.
That's what that means. Yeah.
And I will just note that any existing accessory dwelling units that do not meet the state's definition, current, like this new proposed definition of what an accessory dwelling unit is not technically an accessory dwelling unit. So you could put one of these on a property that has an existing accessory dwelling unit that, say, was either bigger or smaller than what this is.
But it would have to have been approved or grandfathered in, or whatever the term is now.
Yeah.
It couldn't have been under the radar and then they come up. Like, it would have to have been known about, right? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
That's very confusing, I know.
Existing ADUs are not going to be considered ADUs?
So the way the state laid it forward is that they have a very specific definition for what an accessory dwelling unit is and what's protected under the zoning statute. So anything in existence that doesn't meet that definition is not classified as an ADU. So we would have lots in town that would have an ADU that doesn't meet the ADU definition, so we could just say it's an apartment, and then they could add this type of ADU to their property also.
But then would that be their first ADU?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So then they could potentially have 3.
Correct. Which may or may not be a bad thing. It just all depends on how it's viewed.
So even with the second one, there is no restriction on lot size.
The second one, you could probably restrict lot size. I'll double check, but I'm pretty sure when you go through special permit criteria, the board's looking to see, you know, can the neighborhood handle an additional dwelling unit on this property? How does it affect the neighborhood? How does it affect traffic? How does it affect, you know, drainage, all those items? So you would be looking through all of those. But when it comes to special permits, they shall usually be granted and conditioned.
So if everybody in town wanted 2 ADUs in their backyard, I mean, you've completely changed the character of the town.
That is the fear of most planning professionals in Massachusetts, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the second one's by special permit, not by right.
Correct.
So,
About which you said the special permits are usually granted.
The statute states that special permits shall usually be granted unless, you know, there has to be contributing factors that are extreme to the neighborhood in order to be upheld in a court. They look at noise, nuisance, hazard, congestion, but it would have to be to an extreme amount in order to be upheld in a court. But as I said, you condition the permit, so you could limit what they can and can't do.
And there's,
we've had the discussion before the board, and I apologize. You know, variances, they're not granted, and you have to show why they should be. Special permits, they're granted, and you have to show why you shouldn't grant it. They take a different approach legally as you go forward. So, but we do, even given that, we still have a lot of control over special permits and the ability to grant them or not grant them. I know they look at them different than a variance, but
I think adding a second ADU, even as a proposal, is kind of a broad jump from where we were with our earlier bylaw, because the earlier bylaw was special permit, you know, for ADUs, some by right, and then it goes all by right now, a second ADU. I just feel like if it was important, we could have even added it at the time of the original bylaw revision, and at town meeting, not everybody approved. I just think that that's a pretty big decision to include it. And I'm not opposed to leaving that one in for a public hearing, but I think maybe just addressing at that time the opinion of, you know, the office, the planning office and the board generally would be worthwhile.
And don't get me wrong, I think it's great strides to try and promote affordable, attainable housing in our communities. I think if it was there with the owner occupancy requirement, it would go down a little bit easier. But what I think everyone's worried about is the enforcement of, you know, a lot of these units coming online with 3 rental properties per property, you know, and then trying to enforce that they're not seasonal use, they're not seasonal rentals, they're not short-term rentals. You know, we would almost just prefer a slower approach, but of course it's the will of the town. So, you know, if the townspeople want this, of course we would figure out a way.
Leanne, because you have to get a special permit for the second ADU, could you put in there a restriction that it would have to be the primary residence would have to be owner occupied?
I
Could you do
don't
that?
believe so. I don't believe so, but I can double check that one.
Is it
I believe
relevant?
the dimensional requirements we can enforce for a special permit, but I don't think we can regulate that, because they were so blunt about that, being allowed to regulate owner occupancy.
That's actually a good point too, because I wonder if we added that and did heavily regulate it so that we had something to guidelines for special permits to give the planning board some discretion kind of built in. If we would be limited based on, the not looking at the floor plans and all those different requirements, like the AG might look at that as if we're trying to backdoor a way to regulate one ADU by heavily regulating a second ADU.
Yeah. I can definitely ask council their opinion. And what's hard with these two is obviously it's all brand new, so there's no case law about how the courts decide on any of these regulations. So a lot of it's interpretation from, who originally proposed the bill, and then the EOHLC is the State Department of Housing, their guidance on how you should regulate it. So there's still a little bit of disconnect, so we're all just trying to, get rid of them as many gray areas as we can, but I'm sure this is not the last time the ADU bylaw will be before you for revision as we get more into the weeds.
So if we're silent on a second one, there's no option at all.
Yes.
If we put in a option for a second one, does that imply a third one, a fourth one, a fifth one? Is it really all subsequent? Does it open the door to as many as you want?
No, we can regulate that a second is allowed by special permit and only a second.
Period.
Yes, yeah.
And there are no, abutter rights with these, correct?
In what terms?
As far as, typically in other scenarios, you would have, abutters would have to try to oppose something.
Okay.
But there is none of that with this.
All they could do for any of the by right ones is contest a building permit, but they'd be looking at specific code violations, and if none existed, it wouldn't be upheld. With a special permit, a butter notification goes out. Abutters would often appear before this board to relay their concerns, and then you would try to adjudicate the concerns with conditions if reasonable. But for anything that's
So
by
it'd be a
right,
tough road.
it's tough. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think there were a lot of times unintended consequences of things. I mean, imagine if there were that many more rentals all of a sudden, like the impact on traffic,
Yeah.
like a lot of trickle-down consequences that would happen from it that you might not foresee.
Yeah. And the current use of ADUs in our community, from what we see and what we permit the most, is really people wanting to age in place, and oftentimes they move into the accessory dwelling unit and rent the main house to family. That's typically what we see that want to move back to the Cape. I would say probably 90% of our permits are for that reason.
And Sandwich is primarily year-round resident too versus the other Cape towns, so I think.
We have about 700 to 1,000 short-term rentals currently. Yeah.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Oh, I thought it was, yeah.
But we are much more year-round than the rest of the Cape. I think we're only at an 11% seasonality,
Okay.
or maybe 9, somewhere between 9 and 11. So we're one of the lowest on the Cape. Yep. So we'll keep that in to bring to public hearing, and I can ask those questions that you had about regulating a second one. Then enforcement, just he, she changed to they. And then amnesty, this just doesn't really apply anymore, because if it's by right everywhere and you can meet the qualifiers, you wouldn't need amnesty, you just would be able to have one. And then we move into the definitions. This is the one that Jeff had mentioned earlier. It's the exact definition from the state. And council thought we should add, you can see the blue bullet point at the end, that it shall be subject to site plan review, so that this can kind of give us some regulatory enforcement over it a little bit. Just like placement, hopefully a landscaping plan to see what it would look like, elements like that. And as I mentioned, site plan review is done with the regulatory department heads and engineering, fire and police. We put in the definition for a gross floor area. So we used to regulate by habitable floor area, which excluded bathrooms, walkways, closets. Gross floor area includes all of those spaces, so it does end up being a good bit smaller. And these are all the state definitions for that. And that is the accessory dwelling unit bylaw. If there's no more questions on that one, I'm happy to move on to merger.
Just one other thing I'm curious about, the parking, it's what, one space for one ADU? So what would be, with additional, would then it require a
Another
second space?
Yes,
So one per ADU, no matter how many you have?
correct. Yeah.
So that alone might limit some people because they just wouldn't have the area.
Yes, exactly.
to
There's a
make
lot
another
of,
spot.
yeah, there's a lot of qualifiers that wouldn't,
Right.
yeah. And just the cost is extraordinary right now. And I know the engineering department might have some comments on the parking, which, you know, if you don't want to speak to it tonight, I'm happy to review, that we can add for the board too.
Yeah, just on the quick review, we haven't looked at this in detail, but just one item that popped up was just that the requirement that additional parking be pervious, which on the one hand, I can understand the intention there to reduce the amount of impervious surfaces that are created, but on the other hand, there can be some situations where added pervious parking can contribute to erosion problems, which can be detrimental for things that are downslope. So that's something we'll look at, and we'll work with planning on some suggested language there.
So you should see that at your next meeting on February 4th.
The pervious, and maybe I misread it. I thought that was mandated by the state.
No, that was what was in our existing bylaw. That
So that wasn't mandated, we just carried that forward.
carried it forward, yeah.
Thank you for that clarification.
Okay. Okay, so then as we move on to section 2550, which is our non-conforming lots, currently what happens with lots that are undersized, that are held in common ownership after, date is December 31st, 1998, they merge for zoning purposes. The intent of the state at the time was to create more conforming lots that were larger than some of the existing lots. But the state changed this so that if there's qualifiers, which I added under a new section 2560, that if you meet these, your lots do not merge for zoning purposes. So it reads, adjacent lots under common ownership shall not be treated as a single lot for local zoning purposes if at the time of recording or endorsement the lots conform to then existing requirements of area, frontage, width, yard, or depth, where each such lot has not less than 10,000 square feet of area and 75 feet of frontage, and B, are located in a zoning district that allows for single-family residential use. Any single-family residential structure constructed on said lot shall not exceed 1,850 square feet of heated living area, shall contain not less than 3 bedrooms, and shall not be used as a seasonal home or short-term rental, all of which shall be reflected in a deed restriction to be recorded prior to the occupancy of the dwelling. And that is all state language. I think, actually, sorry, the only thing that we added was the deed restriction to be recorded, just so we can keep track of what these homes should look like, basically.
So this is 2560, is that what you were reading?
Yes, yeah. So the amendment to 2550, that just says unless qualifies under the next section, and then I just added the next section in from the new state law. So this would make quite a few unbuildable lots now buildable within town. We have a couple in Holly Ridge that I remember, and there's a few spotted around town. A lot of the times, a lot of our mergers happen around Town Neck. This wouldn't do much to help those lots, as most of them are usually about 5,000 square feet. So a minimum of 10,000 square feet. The purpose of this was to create more affordable housing by restricting the size of the dwelling and the bedrooms.
It's state language. It is what it is.
Yeah. Can't necessarily take away, but you could potentially add something if you wanted to.
You can add some, but it can't
But not,
restrict.
yes.
You get that fine line between what's
What their intent
benefit
is.
and, you know, you're trying to avoid something, but if you're restricted, you can't do it.
Correct.
There's a number of lots where I live that will benefit from this.
Could you say that it has to be used as a year-round primary residence? Because it says that it shall not be used as a seasonal home or short-term rental. Could you say that it shall be used as a primary residence and not as a seasonal home or short-term rental? Or does it not have to be a primary residence?
It does not have to be a primary residence, and it could be rented.
Could that be like that, either a primary residence or 12-month consecutive? I just feel like this one, I feel like if that was intent of that was kind of from our earlier conversation, affordable housing, and it should be used as such, which I think would require, either a 12-month rental or that it be the primary residence of the owner, so it's used as housing.
Well, the state law states, as you said here, it can't be used for seasonal.
Mm-hmm.
It cannot be used for short-term.
So, I mean, in
It
essence,
doesn't give you many more options.
then in essence, it would
You're
either
not
have to
using
be
it
used.
seasonally, you're not using it short-term, then, other than you may not be using, it may not be owner occupied.
Well, short-term rental means less than 30 days, so you could do like a month-to-month, rent, like a lease, versus like a 12 consecutive. So if you have a year lease with someone, versus renting it for like 3 month stints, like for if you were going to rent to somebody, I guess it would even work for temporary workers at like the hospital or something. You could rent for short-term periods.
Seasonal, we typically see, so we see the short-term rentals as under 30, but then the seasonal we see as kind of that 3 months to 6 months.
That would qualify as seasonal,
Yeah.
so not like.
So it's more implied that, I mean, if you can't do seasonal or short-term, that it would be for year-round or rented year-round housing. I can ask that we put in, it's used for year-round housing.
Yeah, I just think if that's the intent of it, I think why not just say it versus imply it?
Okay, I can draft that and have that in there for your review at next time, if everyone's okay with that.
I'm okay with that.
I'm gonna say it.
Okay. And that rounds up our zoning changes.
So next, is a proposed, short-term rentals, proposed general bylaw.
Yeah, so this actually, this is kind of a unique circumstance. So basically, the select board is undertaking some short-term rental regulations, and they have asked for the planning board's input on them, and ultimately whether or not you would make a recommendation to recommend them to the select board, to not recommend them, or to make no recommendation at all. The reason this came about is the 10th edition of the building code was published in October. And the building code is now regulating short-term rentals for safety, compliance, and inspections. So we are starting to implement a registration program where all short-term rentals must register with the town of Sandwich. They must sign up for an annual inspection. At the previous town meeting, we just set up our revolving fund for these inspections. And it just felt like it was a good time to start looking at potentially coupling that with a land use bylaw. That would go hand in hand and would complement each other. We haven't had a huge call for restrictive regulations on short-term rentals. We'll get a handful of complaints a year, particularly related to noise nuisance, parking, trash pickup, those types of items that usually rectifies itself by the time someone else comes in. As I had mentioned, we have about 700 registered short-term rentals with the Department of Revenue that are paying their short-term rental tax to the Department of Revenue. I have done probably 15 compliance Zoom sessions with different companies, and they said that we're more likely towards 1,000. We probably have about 300 that aren't paying taxes. So we're able to get lists from them too to know who we have to send out all this information to. So we're proposing this as a general bylaw because we don't have, general bylaws take effect and you don't have vested rights. If we propose it as a zoning bylaw, we would have grandfathering of existing short-term rentals. It would be very difficult to kind of regulate as much. When it's introduced as a general bylaw under the board, it's the select board, it's easier to regulate. You start it on a date, and everyone moving forward has to come into compliance by that.
So
by
there'd
the
be
time
no
of that date.
grandfathering.
There'd be no grandfathering of uses. You were just required at that point, you're required by the state building code to register, but then you'd be required under this bylaw to add additional information. So I'm happy to go through it and see if, if there's anything that you have questions about. But just to note, so the select board, this will go before them, probably towards the end of February. They are the ones that hold the public hearing on it and solicit information from the public, and then they bring it to town meeting. But they have asked for your input and guidance. So short-term rentals, the first section definitions. This is the short-term rental definition from the state that is generally used. The building code references, is rented to occupants for 1 to 30 consecutive days at a time. Something is considered a short-term rental if it's rented for under 30 days for at least 14 days out of the year. It then qualifies as a short-term rental. So that's the standard definition. Then we go to section 212 for the purpose. And the purpose is to provide for the orderly operation of short-term rentals for residential properties that balance private, neighborhood, and public interests and will, number 1, protect and maintain the residential character of existing neighborhoods. 2, protect public health and safety. 3, enable residents to better afford to live here, maintain their properties, and contribute to the community. And 4, ensure the continued revenues to the town from the short-term rental excise tax. In eligible units, so the following are not eligible to be rented as short-term rentals: dwellings designated as income restricted or subject to affordability covenants, accessory apartments and accessory dwelling units, and then dwellings subject to any outstanding building, sanitary, zoning, or fire code violations. As we move on, registration and inspections. So all short-term rentals will be registered and inspected annually to the Sandwich Building Department in accordance with Table 110, Section 110.7, Periodic Inspections, 780 CMR, and shall adhere to all health and safety requirements, including occupancy limitations based on inspections. Number 2, rental certificates shall be displayed on the property in a prominent location and shall include 24-hour local contact information.
What does that mean exactly?
So basically, posted on the property would be the owner, the person who owns it, whether it's a company, and a telephone number. So say there was excessive noise or nuisance or trash or parking or parties, they would have a person to call, or if they called the police department, the police would have a person to call to say,
It'd be like a
your
little
property.
sign on their door or something?
Yeah. So they'd basically end up getting a certificate once they go through all of their inspections, and then they would have to put their information and post it. So it just adds a level of accountability that we don't currently have. And then 3, the town reserves the right to post rental locations and contact information on the town website per Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 64G, Section 14. And then we move on to general provisions. Trash removal. All household trash shall be removed from the premises immediately after occupancy is concluded and at a minimum once per week. Parking. Adequate on-site parking shall be provided with a minimum of 1 space per bedroom. There should be no parking on lawns, no overnight street parking, and no street parking that impedes traffic or traffic safety at any time. 3, duration. Renting for less than 2 consecutive nights is prohibited. This is something that a lot of other towns have put in. They felt it's better for the neighborhood that you're getting kind of a 2-stay instead of just each night a different person. But I mean, that's always up for, well, all of it's up for questions. 4, all smoke, carbon dioxide, and heat detectors shall be in compliance with Massachusetts State Building Code, 780 CMR 10th edition. Then we move on to type of rentals. Short-term rentals are for residential uses only. No large-scale events, including but not limited to weddings, corporate events, class family reunions, and photo shoots. No events that include tents or amplified music, and they shall not adversely affect the residential character of the neighborhood. Pets, adherence to any and all state and local regulations regarding pets. Use of RVs, campers, or sleeping tents is prohibited. And then 8, short-term rentals shall meet all local, state, and state regulations, including but not limited to building and fire codes, health codes, water supply, and wastewater disposal. So those are the general provisions. Sorry, let me just move this down as we get to the
Can I
next
ask a question about item 2?
Yeah.
Is that just a standard one space per bedroom? It seems like a lot to me.
It is, yeah, it's just standard from what I've seen in other towns, but of course we can always change it if you feel that you wouldn't need one space per bedroom.
Just, it was curious to me that, you picture a family of 4 coming down to rent a place for a week. They're going to have one car. And other times you might need more. But it is a way for us to just make sure that their space is allotted.
Yeah, I think it's just, that they would have the space in case every room in the house was taken by a single person.
Yeah, fair enough.
Is kind of the essence of what that is, and so if there's no parking off-street.
The other thing, two things. One is that a lot of families come down, even though it's a family, they come down with 2 cars. It gives them more flexibility when they're here, and given a lot of them come down with so much stuff. I live in a neighborhood that has short-term rentals. I have a short-term rental across from the street from me. I've never seen a family show up with 1 car. and the people that own it, that rent it, they pick some really great people. We've been very fortunate.
I get
but
it.
I've
It
never
just gives
seen
more
anyone show
control.
up with 1 car. They always have 2. It gives them a lot of flexibility, and usually they're packed to the gills with all their goodies for their time at the beach and so forth. So I think it's a good idea.
What are other towns doing? Are they, because there was a while where nobody had any short-term rental bylaws, right? And now are people starting to enact them?
So people are starting to, there's been, I think it's really what happened in the town of Nantucket that kind of started to spark people saying, we need to do something. What basically happened, I'll try an abbreviated version because it's quite long-winded, but there was in a residential district, there was a short-term rental beside a property owner. They ended up going through, the town, the zoning board of appeals, and then the courts, ultimately stating that this was, in fact, a commercial use in a residential district, and it was not an extension of a residential use. The courts upheld that determination by the homeowner that that was a commercial use, and that the bylaw did not expressly authorize that use. So, this is Cape Cod, and we have an awful lot of seasonality and short-term rentals, and they're a boost to the economy, and people use them. And so people have been putting in, reasonable regulations to help have the use continue in the community, but maybe also try to regulate it so it's not a nuisance to the neighborhoods. So it's a very difficult use to regulate. So we just look to the communities that have done a good job. This bylaw is pretty similar to Yarmouth's bylaw. They've had a lot of success with how they regulate. Most of their regulation is through the health department. Ours would be through the building department and select board. But this seems to be kind of one of the best. Provincetown has very, very strict short-term rental bylaws whereby a corporation can't own the property. They have, you have to be a resident of the town. They're very strict, and that just didn't seem to fit the town of Sandwich and what the planning department and the building department hear from the residents. So this just seemed a little bit more in line with what we hear from residents. But
Did you limit the number of properties that maybe a corporation or entity could own? Is there or was that just not something that seems to
it's
ever
not
really...
something we ever really wanted to get involved with in terms of regulating ownership.
Okay.
Surprisingly, we don't have that many in town. So when I did these compliance Zooms, they often list your highest earners in town and different entities that own. A lot of people live in the town that have short-term rentals.
Okay.
A lot of people use their home as a short-term rental and just rent out a portion. These homes are in trusts. There's companies that, they have their primary residence in town, and then they might own 5 or 6 beach cottages that are in a corporation's name, but they're still residents. So to us, it just felt like we don't want to do anything that unreasonably regulates someone's livelihood that's in town. Yeah, I don't think we have the same issues as a community like Provincetown, where you're having, the townspeople run out by short-term rentals. But at least by introducing a bylaw, it's something we can always revisit if we start to see that trend occurring.
And do they, other towns, like including Yarmouth, have that in that one section about posting a contact information? They do have that in there.
Do have that in there, yeah. Which I think that's one of our biggest complaints when we hear from residents, is that they don't know what to do when something is happening next door that they don't think reaches the level of, I need to call the police.
Okay.
But they don't know who to talk to about, like, this isn't okay, this is really disruptive to us.
Okay. Mhm. Yeah.
So by giving that information, there hopefully is an avenue that someone can speak to the person, and then realistically we have stronger enforcement on our end as to what could be done if you violate the rules of your certificate several times.
By the time it gets to you, hopefully they've exhausted some kind of attempt to satisfy it, so it's reached to a
Yes.
certain level by the time it gets to you. Okay.
Yeah, and how much, as far as enforcement, how much additional manpower is this going to require to manage it?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So the rental inspections in and of themselves is an additional, approximately 700 inspections a year. So as part of when we created the revolving fund, we will be creating a part-time position within the building department that will solely be used for short-term rentals, and then enforcement typically falls on the building commissioner for him to enforce. But the person that would be hired for part-term rental inspections, short-term rental inspections, would have to be a building official. They have to be licensed and have taken their exams through the state.
How is it going to be enforced as to, like, say, if there are renters that don't report that they're renting, so they're not paying their fair share of the tax?
Sure.
How is that going to be discovered and enforced?
So for this first year of implementation, it's pretty much a pilot. What we know is that we have 700 registered with the Department of Revenue that are required to register with the town and get their safety inspection. So we're going to reach out to each one of those 700 to notify them of what they're going to need to now do. It's going to be interesting to see how many actually register and sign up. And then we're going to have to take a look at those that don't pay tax, short-term rental tax, and that are kind of just floating under the radar. There are companies out there that we can contract with that can get that detailed information, because what they do is they basically troll all of the different sites, and they do a cross-reference between who has postings and who is listed on the Department of Revenue's list, because it's all public record. So at that point, then we'd have to make a decision as to how we would get everyone to come into compliance. But approximately 300 properties, that's a large quantity, so we don't anticipate that everyone within the first year will come into a compliance, but that will create a game plan so that they do eventually.
For the sake of fairness.
Absolutely. Exactly.
Right. Just one other thing, I'm just curious, I don't know if you know, why would the town want to post the locations of the rentals on their website?
So that's in case of, so when we move on to the enforcement section, it talks about holding a hearing. So basically, it's all public record, so we would be posting that someone was not in compliance and that the select board or the building commissioner was holding a hearing regarding their non-compliance, and it would have their information listed on it. So it's kind of just stating that your information could be posted on a town agenda through the website. That's kind of the only time we would post it, is if, we wouldn't post a list on the town's website of who has one. There would be no reason to do so. But it reserves our right that if someone was in non-compliance, that we could bring them into compliance by having a hearing and posting it.
Just that they need to be shamed then.
But they're not being shamed. Like you said,
I was joking.
to hold a hearing, you have to post it, and that's all. That's all that says.
Basically, yeah.
Not
Kind of making people aware. And then we can move on to the enforcement section. So the provisions of this bylaw shall be enforced by the building commissioner. Any violations of this bylaw shall be governed by this section. Whoever violates any provision of this law or a regulation promulgated hereunder may be penalized by indictment or on a complaint brought in the district court. The town may seek to enjoin violations thereof through any lawful process, and the election of one remedy by the town shall not preclude enforcement through any other lawful means. So clearly that was written by council for worst case scenarios. Non-criminal disposition, whoever violates any provisions of this bylaw or a regulation promulgated hereunder may be penalized by non-criminal disposition process as provided in Massachusetts general laws. Then it just goes down further and talks about, fines or penalties in the amount of $100 for the first offence, $200 for the second offence, and $300 for a third and subsequent offence. Each day or portion thereof shall constitute a separate offence. So if anyone is in a violation of something here, typically we don't jump immediately to fines. We try to work it out with whoever owns the property and to resolve the issue. But if someone was, not coming into compliance and we had excessive complaints, we could start issuing fines for that reason. Civil penalty, in accordance with general law, the town may assess a civil penalty not to exceed $5,000 for any violation of this bylaw or regulation issued hereunder. Each day a violation continues shall be considered a separate offence. And I just skipped a paragraph. We could also suspend the certificate of registration if a notice of violation of this bylaw or any regulation promulgated hereunder or other order is issued to the owner of the dwelling unit operated as a short-term rental after a certificate of registration is issued. The building commissioner or select board, so that's a question I really have for the select board, is if they would like to be the ones holding the hearing or they feel that it should fall within the jurisdiction of the building department. So after a hearing, may suspend for a period of time or revoke said certificate of registration until the violation has been cured or otherwise resolved. Multiple violations by any owner may, at the discretion of, once again, either building commissioner or select board, whichever they deem appropriate, and after a hearing, disqualify that owner for obtaining a certificate of registration for a period of up to 3 years. So I don't know if you have a preference on whether you think it should fall departmentally or whether it should be a hearing in front of the select board.
I don't think that wasn't at the bottom of my,
Yeah, mine cut off after the first.
mine cut off.
Like the first paragraph.
After here.
It wasn't in the package.
Oh, it was in the one that went out today. So all this was added by council. That's, sorry.
okay.
Yes.
I gotcha.
Yeah, so
It
what
didn't
Maureen
print
sent
it.
out this morning
I
was,
didn't print the one that came out today.
okay.
Because I printed the one that came out today and this wasn't in there.
Oh, so what was that last piece? that
Yeah, so
you-
council pretty much just completely rewrote my whole section on enforcement, just for all the different avenues that this could happen. So basically, if someone is in violation of the bylaw or other order, let me put it up. So
Oh,
it's
it's right
basically
there. Oh, I didn't
suspension of
even-
certificate
okay.
of registration.
Sorry.
So a hearing must be held in order to kind of adjudicate what they're in violation of. And then during the hearing process, their certificate of registration could be abandoned for up to 3 years. So
I don't personally have a strong preference whether it's the building commissioner or the select board, but it does seem to make sense to keep it in one place, and it's with the building commissioner. So, and I suspect the select board wouldn't have a problem with that.
yeah, I'm not sure that they need anything else added to their docket.
And any violation probably will be building driven, because that's really what the focus of
Yeah,
this
We're
is.
doing the inspections.
It is, and a lot of the information, well, I shouldn't say a lot, some of the information that I've put in here is directly from the building code, as to some of the things they would be looking at through their short-term rental inspection process.
I suppose the only thing kind of outside of the scope of that would be is if it was like noise complaints, repeated noise complaints, that could be a violation, right? And then would the building commissioner be kind of comfortable dealing with that?
I mean, he deals with that currently, and
Okay.
he or she, as they go forward in
Yeah.
employment, they deal with that through zoning.
Okay.
So that's why it kind of fits that they are the enforcement agent for the full zoning bylaw, so they're used to this kind of adjudicatory power. But it's also what would happen is if anyone contested that opinion of the building commissioner, the appeal would go before probably the select board to then adjudicate that he or she make the right determination that this was excessive. So I mean, there's always an avenue to appeal a decision.
Yeah, I think building commissioner.
I agree. And then severability. If any provision in this chapter shall be held to be invalid by a court of contempt jurisdiction, then such provision shall be considered separately and apart from the remaining provisions, which shall remain in full force and effect, or to take any other action relative thereto. And that basically ends the bylaw.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense with your explanation. Thank you for all that information. That was very helpful.
It's
Yeah.
probably a little bit long-winded, but.
No, it was very helpful, yeah, especially the Nantucket kind of understanding on the purpose behind it, so, yeah.
I have a few questions or comments. As you did, I went and read a lot of different towns that have these. Under 12.03, item 3, talks about building code, sanitary code, zoning code, fire code. I know where to find the building, the zoning, and the fire code. Where do you find sanitary code? Is that defined somewhere versus health code? See, I could find health code, but I couldn't find sanitary.
Yeah, the sanitary code is a subsection of the health code.
So should we use the word sanitary or should we use the word health code since sanitary is a subset?
We could use health because it would
I think
encompass.
health is more appropriate.
Yeah,
Given your explanation of what I read,
yeah,
I couldn't, because I think health is more inclusive.
yeah, you're right.
So I think we should be using the word health here, not sanitary. I had a question under that section about corporation zoning, but you already answered that. Down under section 12.05, item 3, renting for less than 2 consecutive nights is prohibited. What that does allow, though, is someone rents for 2 nights, and then somebody else will rent for 2 nights, and then somebody else. So every 2 days, you've got people rotating in. And as I said, I live directly across from a short-term rental, and there's another short-term rental behind me and another short-term rental to the left of me, 2 houses over. So I did read in a number of different towns that they only allow 1 rental in a 7-day period. So you could have a 2 nights, but now there'd have to be 5 vacant nights before the next one could occur. So essentially you have is that 1 week kind of rotation. I'd like to see some words like that in there, like I saw in other towns. So what the other towns have is it's only 1 rental per 7-night period. It doesn't mean you have to rent for 7 nights. It just means that within a 7-night period, you've only got changeover once, versus you could have it changing over up to 3-4 times, the way this is written.
Yeah.
Is there a downfall with changeover? Like,
Yes.
what would it be, what would the downfall be, just so I understand?
So the downfall you have cars coming and going. You've got the disruption in the neighborhoods. You've got people packing up to leave in the morning, and they obviously leave early. You got those cars coming and going. You got the noise, and then you got the people coming, and they got the cars coming and unloading, and the noise associated with that. So you get that turnover. You also get people coming and going to clean it. So we get the cleaners showing up and then leaving, and you got multiple cars with the cleaners coming and going, and they're trying to sequence it between it. And then you get the trash pickup, which occurs because they have to pick up trash between it. You're not going to rent it with someone. So it does get disruptive. Most of ours are all 1 week. Typically, even if somebody rents it for 3 or 4 days, you don't see somebody else for the next week anyways. So this is typically where it has. But yeah, it is disruptive to have it every couple of days, every 3 days. So, like I said, I did read that in some other towns that they don't require it to be 1 week rental, but they do require that a rental be sequenced such that they occur in 1 week intervals. So I think that would be a good idea.
So is there a maximum allowed within the week? I mean, no, maybe it's a minimum. I mean, so if it's, so you could have, say, a 3-day rental and then turnover, or it would have to be.
You could have a 3-day rental, but then you have 4 days that nothing happens. The next rental comes in after the 7 days has equipped. You see how that?
Yeah, what is the measurement? Like, when is
Yeah.
it? Is it
Well, I don't have
is it a calendar week? Is it like Sunday to Sunday?
No.
Because people are probably trying to rent over each weekend, or
Yeah.
at minimum.
I'll go look it up in the towns that are doing it. We just
just to try and
towns
find
that have it in
language.
there and it's working for them, as you
Yeah.
said. So, but the idea is a good idea, that you avoid this constant turnover, which is disruptive to the neighborhood
Absolutely.
for various reasons.
My only
And this is sometimes when we get into, almost which neighborhood it is, because some neighborhoods we have that are pretty much all short-term rentals and that do turn over at a higher frequency than one that is more of a neighborhood situation. So I just wonder how we balance those interests.
My concern would be you'd be significantly limiting someone's ability to generate revenue from the property, which is the purpose they have it for.
For doing
And
it.
And I don't know
remember,
if that's
it's balance, right? All regulations are about balance.
Sure.
You regulate, as soon as you put a regulation in place, someone is prevented from doing something so that somebody else doesn't have to deal with the disruption of that. I mean, that's what regulations are all about, somewhat safety-based and so forth. So you're correct. But then as a resident there, I'm going to tell you, you know, it's the disruption, okay, and the impact on our lives, and so it's a balance.
Yeah. The concern I have for it is, I think the economics of it would discourage an owner from engaging in two-day rentals. Because,
Good.
I mean, the housekeeping and the trash and all of that. But on the rare exception where they have a couple days that are empty, I'd hate to deprive somebody of the revenue of doing that, because I think it would be the exception rather than the rule. But, you know, I could be wrong on that, so.
Yeah, and if it's not regulated now, if it's not being presented as an issue and people aren't upset about it, I guess, vocally, if the,
I mean, people
Well, I
purchase
won't-
these homes for the sole purpose of renting them as a livelihood, and so to, you know, put restrictions on that seems a little encroaching to me.
We have other restrictions besides that one.
but it's kind of building code driven for like safety and just to really ensure, and the kind of to circle back to
Number
the,
of parking spots per bedroom?
well, and to circle back to the whole, you know, why are we doing this and why are towns doing this, is really to protect short-term rentals so that they can't be overridden by failure to expressly state that you can use a home for commercial use. So if you're kind of sticking with that intent and kind of the purpose of adding the bylaw, I think that might kind of go against that idea of it. I don't know. Were you
Well,
saying that?
I was just going to say, when you said it's not necessarily a problem, it is for some people.
Okay,
I
so they
won't
do
I
go
won't
here.
say it's not necessarily. We
Okay.
do receive complaints. We
Yeah.
don't receive
For
a
turnover?
lot of complaints, but we could receive 5 or 6 in a summer season, and I wouldn't.
Yeah.
And those are the people that call us. Not everyone's going to call us when they have a complaint, but
You don't
That's
hear
first.
from everybody.
exactly.
And that's for frequency of turnover complaints specifically?
Yeah. So it's a number. It's noise, nuisance, traffic, trash, but a lot of it, I would say majority of them do reference, oh, I've had 3 different people here in the past weekend.
Okay.
Like so it's not that it's
Yeah.
not an issue. It definitely is.
Yeah.
What's harder when you're doing a town-wide bylaw is there's certain areas where maybe that's more practical and appropriate than other areas. But as though we're not necessarily getting into that in this type of bylaw, but it's definitely something that could be looked at, or these comments made to the select board, so that during their public hearing process they can kind of see, is that something we should be enforcing, that they do only have, if it's 2 consecutive nights, you don't rent for the rest of the week, or
It's worth bringing it up.
yeah.
Yeah,
Just to
if there's other
comment.
language stuff that you've seen, that might be good for the select board to see.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, they could have a public hearing and find out how much of a problem it really is.
Right.
They are
Yeah.
required.
They are required to have.
Yeah. And we have had a neighborhood that came to one of our zoning board of appeal meetings probably 2 years ago to discuss short-term rentals and the impact it was having on their neighborhood, the negative impact. So it's something we've been investigating for quite a few years now, but just seemed like the right time to put something forward. So it really is that balance between people's personal property rights, but then also the established neighborhoods and trying to keep a peaceful environment there for everyone.
So having bylaws at all is a big step to being able to regulate that a little more assertively, and that just might help balance the issue as well.
Yeah, worthwhile bringing it forward.
At least find language, that we could potentially propose.
And then the only other comment I had was under this section 12.05, item 5, type of rentals. I had a suggestion to add an item D. So they speak in here that, shall not adversely affect the residential character of the neighborhood. I had something that was a little bit more specific. It's, in addition, it shall not cause disruption of the peace, tranquility, or safety of the neighborhood. Suggestion for reinforcing that The only comments I have.
Does the board feel like they would like to digest all this before making a recommendation? Because we can always put it to your February meeting if you'd like to digest before making a recommendation, or if you feel that it's in pretty good shape and I can have those add-ons included with the recommendation that the board, that the select board take a look at it.
I think that's the way to go. I mean, that's my feeling.
I agree.
Yeah.
So if the board would like then to make a motion to recommend the short-term rental bylaw be moved to the select board's office with the amendments that we've spoke about.
I make a motion to move the short-term rental bylaw forward with the comments from our meeting tonight.
I second that motion.
All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
All right, next up is Cool Corridors Grant Program. We have a letter here. Yep.
Okay. See? Yeah. So the town of Sandwich was selected to be a recipient of the Cool Corridors Grant Program for up to $50,000. So this was the one that our tree warden, James Sackos, proposed to you all that you had great questions on. And so their award is for the planting of 60 trees and their maintenance. So we just wanted to update the board to let you know that we had received the grant.
I feel kind of bad he's not here tonight. So.
Send congratulations
Is
to him.
there
Pass
a
it
way,
along.
is there anything in the town, like a way that you give positive feedback? Like, that seemed like a very proactive action on his part.
You could email the department, or that's actually a very good point. Maybe it's something for our new innovations email, that when people have good ideas, they can email us their innovations and then we can take a look at implementing. So I can bring that back to the innovations team about a good way to be able to give positive feedback. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Request for comment, 26 Tupper Ave, there was a variance. It looks like there was an error with architect. They got approved for a setback. It was within setback lines, right? They got a variance on it initially, or no, it was approved?
No, they did not get a variance.
No,
So
they
what
were
it,
coming before
yeah,
for
they were
one now.
they went to the select board to get a special permit for increasing
that's what it
their
was,
floor
special
area by over 30% on a non-conforming lot. And basically what happened is they proposed like an 8.9-foot breezeway and an attached garage. But what they did is they constructed a 10-foot breezeway and the attached garage went into the setback. So it was caught on the foundation inspection. So after a foundation's poured, you're required to submit an as-built to the building department to make sure that it is in compliance. So they went out after that point. The framing had unfortunately already begun at that point. So the building is partially framed. But the garage is within the setback. So they're now requesting a variance from the zoning board to come into compliance.
I think there was, in the material that we received, there was some comment that a neighbor had been, the abutter had been talked to and wrote a letter supporting a variance.
Yes.
But I didn't see that. Was that in the packet, or we wouldn't have got that?
I don't think it was sent to our department. It might have been, this went before the Historic District Committee to approve the design, so it might have been a support for that,
So
for the
not for
design,
the
but not
variance.
for the variance. We haven't received anything in our office to support the variance.
So it's a 1.2-foot variance.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense. I don't have any comment on it.
Okay.
The only comment I would have is if the neighbors had concerns.
Yeah, of course.
But otherwise, I think, wasn't their fault.
If the abutters are fine with it, then
Would you like to move that forward as an official comment of the board, or
Official comment about abutters, or no, that there's no comment?
about the abutters?
is that something, wouldn't that be something the zoning board
It
would
would,
generally
yes.
do?
Yeah, we
don't
typically
know,
don't.
We don't know the butters don't have a problem with it.
Yeah, then I don't think it's.
The butters they haven't had the hearing yet. We're being asked, from a planning perspective, a review of this. Do we have any concern from a planning perspective?
No.
And from a planning perspective, I don't see any concern. And then from other, the house next door is far enough away that the whole idea behind setbacks. There's a few reasons, but one is safety-wise, you can get around the house and back. It's not an issue because there's no house adjacent on the other side, so I don't see it as safety.
I guess.
So no comment?
Okay, no comment.
All right, deliberations are complete. Any other matters not reasonably anticipated?
I just had two things to alert the board to. In front of you is the new zoning bylaws, May 2024. That includes the update to the apartments over a commercial building that had the ratio that was approved in the end of October by the AG's office. So these are the most up-to-date zoning regulations for you to use. And then the second point I just wanted to bring up is that we have hired Stephen Tucker as the new town planner. He is anticipated to start on February 10th and will be joining your meetings at that point.
Where is he from?
He's originally from Sandwich and is currently down in Washington, D.C., finishing up his contract with the EPA.
Okay.
And then he will be moving back to town.
You must be happy about that.
Yeah, very happy.
You must
We
be.
will have additional staff, absolutely.
Will the two of you have an overlap for a while at meetings, or?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah, probably a good 6 months, make sure Stephen feels comfortable before I step out of night meetings for a while.
I have a question for you. Last time I saw Brendan, which was when I think it was at Ralph's going away party, Brendan told me he was going to retire.
Yes.
Has he announced?
He has not officially announced a date, but I would say it's imminent.
Okay.
Yeah, within this calendar year.
Okay. I'm curious because he did mention it to me, and we do, he has supported the meeting, and there are times when we need, his support. I was just curious where that stood.
Absolutely.
Plus, I wanted to make sure I hadn't missed the.
Oh, of course, no. I will definitely let you all know when we know his timeline.
Thank you.
Of course.
Any other matters not reasonably anticipated? All right, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
I so move that we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Great.